Thanks for inviting me here, and thank you for being here. I want to congratulate STM organization for thinking of organizing something like this, which I think is a bit overdue, but without Michael's effort, it would not have happened. So I'm glad we are getting something going, and as Jason said, we hope that we have more of these exchange of facts, opinions, and ideas in the years to come in this region. I was asked to speak about the trends I see in the future of Asian publishing. But to do that, first we're going to go back in history. In 1924, Karl Haushofer used the term Pacific Age to envision the growth of and influence of Asian countries on the global stage. Today, of course, this word Pacific Age is more frequently called the Asia Century, and the nearly century-old idea seems ready to actually spring into reality. The Asian economy now rivals that of Europe and the United States, United States, and its spectacular growth shows absolutely no sign of slowing down. Take, for example, one of the simplest metrics of the country's economic power, which is GDP. Since 2007, China's GDP has nearly tripled, and other countries in Asia like India, Singapore, and Thailand have more than doubled. In the context of this economic growth, it's not surprising to see Asian research accelerating onto the global stage as well. For example, in 2017, Korea's gross expenditure on research and development, otherwise known as GERD, was incredible 4.5% of GDP. This is the highest GERD in the world. But it's not the only ones. So many other countries in Asia are equally dedicated to financing research. Japan is 3%. Thailand has risen from 0.2% 10 years ago to 0.75. So what is the result of all this funding? Articles. China made headlines when its scientific output in Elsevier's Scopus database finally surpassed that of the United States, making it the largest producer of research in the world. That quantity has not been at the expense of quality either. China's average FWCI, or Field-Weighted Citation Index, has grown from a mere 0.4 to now 1.0. And that was only since 1997. And the rest of Asia has followed suit. Singapore's average FWCI rose from 0.96 to 1.7 over the same period. Many people in publishing look at this economic and scientific growth in Asia, and they expect to see similar trends in publishing, with the money and the content both there. STMJ, or Science, Technology, and Medicine Journal, in Asia should be flourishing, right? But instead, they are disappointed. I often see pessimistic news articles about STMJ in Asian newspapers, quoting figures like this. In hot scientific fields like artificial intelligence and environmental science, only one journal of the top 20 in the world is published in Asia. Meanwhile, sampling the 34,000 journals in Scopus, we find that only 672 are in China, 496 in Japan, and 254 in Korea. On the other hand, US has 14,000 and UK 6,000. Now, this is rather normal since journals are predominantly published in English language. Finally, speaking for Elsevier only, 30% of our editors are based in the US, 8 in UK, while only 7, 3.7, and 1.5% are based in China, India, and China, Japan, and India in that order. It's only natural that many people conclude then that STMJ in Asia is lagging behind both Western journal publishing as well as Asia's general economic growth. But there is another way to look at this. While financial ownership of STMJ journal is lower in Asia, owning journals in Asia is not the most important factor to contributing to the global publishing industry. Instead, it's all about influence. To see what I mean, I would like to use an analogy that I'm sure everyone here is quite familiar with in some way: the food restaurant business. Asian food is taking over the world. For today's purposes, I would like to first sample some top-rated restaurants globally. And unsurprisingly, many of these incredible restaurants are right here in Asia. Take, for example, Bow Innovation right here in Hong Kong, a 3-star Michelin restaurant. The restaurant's chef, Alvin Leung Jr., has an engineering degree and has made a name for himself by creating extreme Chinese food. He experiments with traditional Chinese dishes, substituting new ingredients and flavors, often spending months perfecting each plate on the menu. Or there's the 8.5 Otto e Mezzo Bombana. Like Bow Innovation, it's a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Hong Kong, but instead of traditional Chinese dishes, it offers fine Italian cooking. Its head chef is Keith Yamkalok. He is a Hong Kong-born chef who spent years studying his craft at various fine restaurants before assuming the top job at Mandarin Oriental. I'm sorry, at Mezzo Bombana. I had lunch at Oriental yesterday. It was good. While these top-quality restaurants are in fact in Asia, you can now also find incredible Asian food on the other side of the world. One of my personal favorites is in New York City, and it's called Momofuku-ko. At Momofuku, Korean chef David Chang uses a secret kitchen to experiment with new foods and cooking techniques. In many ways, Momofuku is like an innovative software company. The lab operates independently of the restaurants, but the restaurants are free to grab anything the lab has developed into the restaurant menu. It wasn't always so easy to find Asian food outside of Asia, especially at the highest level of dining. Yang Wei, do you remember a good Asian restaurant when you were studying? I don't think so. To see how things have changed over time, I looked at every Michelin star restaurants in New York back in 2006 and compared that to the list today. In 2006, I found 5 Asian Michelin star restaurants in New York, and that was 13% of the total. But in 2019, the list had 29 Asian restaurants for 38%. In the last decade, a shift has occurred, and today, Asian food influences the Western food scene at all levels, where so recently Italian and French food absolutely used to dominate. By now, I'm sure you're all wondering, what the hell is YS talking about food in Asian Publishing Forum? Let me tell you why I think that the situations are somewhat similar. Probably the most common proposal I had heard to support STMJ in Asia is that Asia should own and invest in its own journals and publishers. This, of course, should be encouraged for the long term. Like Keith Yamkalok or Alvin Leung Jr., the Hong Kong chefs I mentioned, there is a huge opportunity to succeed at the highest level, right here in Asia. Both of these chefs have invested their culinary skills in Asia, but in a very different manner. Alvin Leung takes the traditional food and creates exciting new variations based on an old model. Keith found success by joining a world-class restaurant run by famous Italian chef Umberto Bombana. I think that STMJ ownership in Asia can follow similar path of these two chefs. Like Alvin Leung Jr., we can take the traditional idea of a journal and try to make it new and better than any journal published anywhere in the world. This is the style I think of when I hear calls from governments to create and own journals domestically. It's a typical politician talk. Part of the reason for this is that governments see their research base and realize that the ingredients for these models are there, just looking at Asian research in top fields like AI or chemistry. Together, Asia produced 144,000 artificial intelligence papers in the 5 years between 2013 and 2018, which is more than the US and Europe combined. And their research strength is not limited to quantity. As only one example of many, in a critical field like general chemistry, Asia's average FWCI is 1.42, much higher than Europe's 1.24. It is natural to conclude that with quality research should come quality journal ownership. But although Asia could try to do it alone, we should also be open to collaborating wherever it is beneficial. Like Keith Yamka-Lok did when he joined the kitchen of Chef Bombana. This is also how Elsevier has approached our joint venture in China. It's called Keai, and Yan is the general manager there, managing director. By collaborating with local Chinese publishers, we lend our expertise to a new joint venture and provide global support for a growing number of impactful journals, all published in China. But the truth is, owning journals in Asia is not the solution we should all be looking for. Instead, we need to examine how Asia can influence STMJ, not just in Asia, but around the whole world. To do this, we need to stop focusing on the number of Asian journals and publishing companies and instead focus on the people involved in the academic research and publishing community. Asian food has spread far and wide because of Asian chefs who have brought their cuisine outside of Asia. Just think for a moment about the enormous growth of Asian Michelin star restaurants from 15% to 38% in New York City. The impact of these chefs is no longer confined to one single place. As leaders in an industry, Asian chefs are not only just influencing Asian food, they are influencing all foods. This should be the goal of Asian publishing. Let's not set our sights on owning and publishing in Asia, but instead strive to play a major role in the global academic publishing. At restaurants, it is the chefs who carry enormous influence. So we must ask ourselves, who then are the greatest influencers in STMJ? For me, I can tell you a very easy answer. It's the editors and reviewers. It's not the publisher owners. Editors are leaders, not just of the journal, but of their actual field of science. Their work curates and disseminates knowledge for a large community of scholars, and their expertise helps shape what is impactful research and what is not. The case is similar for reviewers. If Asian scholars are given the opportunity to review, then the Asian perspective will begin to have a voice in global publishing and research. Publishers should encourage Asian editors to head journals, regardless of where the journals are published, although I don't believe in making it compulsory. At Elsevier, the number of Asian editors have steadily grown over the years, but today it is still only a small percentage of what it can be. For example, in China and India, the most populous two countries in the world, together they contribute only 8.5% of Elsevier editors as of 2019. For the UK alone, that number is 8%. Clearly, there is work to be done. But there's a lot of progress so far. We just need to keep going. One reason I am disappointed by the viewpoint that Asian publishing is lagging behind is that major publishing companies have in fact already shifted their focus here. In some respects, Asia has actually dominated publishing for years. At Elsevier, a large portion of our publishing, IT, and back office staff that actually produce the journals are located in Singapore, Philippines, and elsewhere in Asia. And we're not the only ones doing that. And more than ever, publishers know they must make the commitment to Asia by investing all manner of full-time staff here and by launching new products in Asian markets. After all, pioneering Asian chefs use the same influencing techniques to open the rest of the world to the wonders of Asian food. But most of these chefs were not successful because they aimed to imitate classical Italian or classical French fine dining. Instead, many of them used fresh new ideas, fresh new ingredients, and cooking techniques to make their food stand out in a very, very crowded field. David Chang, the New York restaurant owner I mentioned at Momofuku, is a great example of this. He set his goals beyond traditional fine dining to innovate like a technology startup in his secret lab. Similarly, Asian publishing must set its sights beyond Asia. Elsevier was founded over 100 years ago as a traditional print publisher. I often like to call this P-content publishing, paper content. But in the 1990s, as the internet began to change the way people thought about and accessed information, Elsevier pivoted. At one point, Forbes predicted that Elsevier would be the first victim of the internet and would go out of business. Elsevier instead invested in electronic or e-content at a very early stage, thus P2E. This gave Elsevier an advantage over other publishers who were slower to respond, but we did not stop there. Today, Elsevier is increasingly a solution content provider. This S content is where we strive to define ourselves, pushing the boundaries of modern artificial intelligence and machine learning to provide analytic big data solutions to researchers and universities. Think about it. Every article we publish is data. Every underlying data that we publish is also data. Although Elsevier followed this path from P to E to S content, there's no reason that every publisher should. Instead, Asian publishing should skip paper and electronic and establish itself as a leading solution provider, just like most Asian countries skipped building landline telephones and went straight to cell phones. We should not strive to create the Asian Lancet, and we do not need to mimic Asia nature. We must be forward-thinking and leverage technology to actually surpass current publishing standards as leaders. I see a bright future for Asian publishing, but that future is not guaranteed, and to get there, we should try not to think in terms of journal ownership, and instead think about influencing the global publishing industry from right here in Asia. The people and the technology are here now. But just like Asian chefs that expanded their say in the food industry, it's our job to take these advantage to create Asian influence at all levels in the STMJ community. And thank you.